Hey, guess what? Bob is back, now at 106.3, playing the 80s, 90s, and whatever.
I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Check us out, the new Bob 106.3.
Feeling down? Here's your prescription for a daily dose of good news and positive vibes. Good Things with Rebecca Turner. Every afternoon, Rebecca highlights all the good things happening right here in the state you call home. Daily exposure to Good Things with Rebecca Turner may cause smiling, feelings of positivity, happiness, and even laughter. When you experience these symptoms, tell your friends to listen.
Okay.
Weekdays starting at 2 p.m. here on SuperTalk Mississippi and now on Amazon Alexa devices. Gardening is one of the most popular hobbies in America, with the average gardener spending 5 hours a week in the garden. In Mississippi, keeping a healthy, beautiful garden is practically an obsession. But if you have questions about gardening, there's no better person to answer them than the garden mama, Nellie Neal. So whether it's gardening basics or troubles for the more experienced gardeners out there, the Garden Mama has the answers for you. Saturday morning starting at 8 on SuperTalk Mississippi and SuperTalk TV.
For something new and unique in talk radio, take a listen to The Ben Shapiro Show. Every day, we're driving the debate in America with the fastest moving, hardest hitting, most comprehensive, fact-based commentary on the radio. We don't hold back. We never shy away from telling you the truth. Our show is a meeting place of ideas. We have the most important guests and the biggest thinkers in America.
Weeknights at 9
For something new and unique in talk radio, take a listen to The Ben Shapiro Show
on SuperTalk Mississippi. Whether you're brand new to the DIY craze or a seasoned veteran, the Handyman Show has something for you. Buddy Slowick shares tips and tricks on everything from odd jobs to complete build-outs, from small home repairs to serious construction. So no matter if you're at the master carpenter level or not quite sure how to use a level, the Handyman Show answers your questions with a healthy dose of humor and some great music too. Saturdays, 10 to noon on SuperTalk Mississippi and on SuperTalk TV. What decisions are being made by state lawmakers, and how will they affect you, your family, and community? If you listen, you'll know. SuperTalk Mississippi, the SuperTalk app, and at supertalk.fl.
Hi, I'm Billy Kinder, host of Big Billy Kinder Outdoors. Hear the show Saturdays at 1, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi. Turkeys, whitetail, Grenada Lake crappie, or Gulfport redfish. We enjoy it all, especially when you're in camp with us on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Hey, I'm Steve Azar, and you never know who or what you'll hear when I spend a Mississippi Minute with my friends. We are with the fabulous Norbert Putnam, as he played on so many hit records, you can't count them, and produced for some of the biggest acts ever. We got to talk Jimmy Buffett.
One day at breakfast, he says, I started a new song. He says, about a night and a day in Key West, I played a bar and I got drunk, and coming home, I stepped out of my flip-flop, and I just kept going. I stepped on a beer can. And the next morning, I'm up, and I'm hungover, and I'm trying to make a margarita. I got some shrimp boiling. I can't find the salt. I said, Jimmy, I kind of like this. And he said, yeah, I think I'll call it Margaritaville.
In a Mississippi Minute.
Be sure to check out In a Mississippi Minute with me, Steve Azar, right here on your local SuperTalk Mississippi station, and now on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher.
If Alexa's part of your life, you've got one more way to access SuperTalk. SuperTalk Mississippi is now available on Amazon Alexa devices. Once enabled, just say, Alexa, play SuperTalk Mississippi at any time and start listening. It's that easy. Just one more way to stay informed and connected with your state. Learn more at supertalk.fm/Alexa. SuperTalk Mississippi. SuperTalk Mississippi. Now available on Amazon Alexa devices.
Hey, guess what? Bob is back, now at 106.3, playing the 80s, 90s, and whatever.
I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Check us out, the new Bob 106.3.
When it comes to the outdoors, we are one. We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the great outdoors. So let's talk about it. SuperTalk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews. Mondays starting at noon. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi. Presented by the Foundation Protecting Our Outdoors Heritage. Listen or watch the show anywhere you get SuperTalk Mississippi. He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. If you're a regular listener to Coast Vue, you know that I came from the media industry. I was a CEO of a media company the last 15, 16 years of my career and led some very significant strategic planning efforts for various companies. I co-led the strategic planning effort for Knight Ridder, the company that owned the Sun Herald. And in fact, interestingly enough, the final report out for that strategic planning effort for Knight Ridder was to be in San Jose the Thursday after Hurricane Katrina hit, to kind of give you an idea. After a year-long effort of work, and then suddenly I couldn't be there for the unveiling of that strategic plan. But later in my career, led some very significant efforts for Advanced Condé Nast, and was very engaged around the digital revolution, how it was impacting newspapers and media and digital online news sites, etc. So I've watched the evolution of social media, and I've talked a lot about it here on this show, that the way social media handles news and information, the way that they spread misinformation, the way that they make it appear that everyone in your news feed agrees with you. It's not good. I'm very, very pleased, though, that Facebook recently reported some changes they're going to be making to their news feed, and we can talk more about that in just a second. I want to spend a couple of shows talking about this. The show today, I've invited State Senator Jeremy England, who's a Republican from District 51 here on the coast. He's been on the show many times. Let me bring him on into the conversation to just say good morning to him first. How you doing, Jeremy?
Hey, good morning, Ricky. Doing great this morning. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
You and I have had a series of excellent conversations, both on the air and through, our interactions on social media. And I've watched you carefully, and I've said in the past that what I like about you is that you may be a conservative, but you're what I refer to as an open-minded conservative. You're someone who really wants to be pressed and hear other people's point of view, and you think, whether it's a point of view that disagrees with you or not, that by listening, the end result will be a better result. And you've read, you're a lawyer. You've gone on the journey to read a lot of the great leaders of our country. You're a bit of a historian. And you're someone I look forward to having this conversation about. But you recently posted something. You actually saw a book. I think you were in one of your travels. You saw a book. The book was about the Republican Party and what's wrong with it and what's wrong with conservatives. You sort of took a picture of it. And then it spurred a thought that's it's sort of something you and I have talked about before. But why don't you tell people what your observation was?
Yeah, Ricky. So when you get in the airport, and I always like to walk through and see what the newest books are that are out. And you always see ones that I guess folks think are going to be very interesting reading, but they grab your attention because they say, this one I believe mentioned how the Republican Party is destroying our democracy. And you see them, it's not just books about the Republican Party. You see books from conservative authors all the time that mention how Democrats are destroying our nation. And, that doesn't lead to good discussion, in my opinion. That makes folks more outraged. And I think we become addicted to that outrage. And then we lose focus on the whole reason that we have our democracy in place. It's to share ideas. It's to, it's to bring together as many ideas as possible and to have a competition in those ideas to see where we can better ourselves and where we can see improvement. And I just don't think those kind of books are helpful. I think those are actually destroying debate, whether they be from the far right or the far right or the far left. They're just not helping the conversation.
Yeah, they're just full of misinformation, and right. We're going to talk a little bit about some of what's wrong with media. That's one of the things that kind of helped move this conversation along, and wanting me to have it. We'll have Jeremy today, and he and I will start to break down some of of this analysis that I'm about to share with you, what it has to say. We won't be able to get through all of the items that are on this graphic that kind of piqued my attention. But then we'll have another show in the near future, actually, with James O'Byrne. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning editor and writer from New Orleans. He's been on the show many times. He used to work with me at NOLA Media Group. He, in fact, was my VP of Innovation at NOLA Media Group, but he lives in the countryside of France today. And we've been on the show a bunch of times talking about different things, the state of media today and social media and whatever. But we'll get James's take on some of this as well. But what I came across, and Jeremy, I sent it to Jeremy via Cami, the content producer for the show. It's something I came across on visualcapitalist.com. And this is a website that graphically demonstrates problems and challenges. And in this particular case, the headline for this one that really got my attention was 33 problems with media in one chart. 33 problems with media in one chart. And let me just read to you the summary. This is the summary to the chart, and then we'll start to kind of break it down a little bit. But here's what it says. One of the hallmarks of democracy and democratic society is a healthy, free-flowing media ecosystem. Okay? In times past, that media ecosystem would include various mass media outlets, from newspapers to cable TV networks. Today, the internet and social media platforms have greatly expanded the scope and reach of communication within society. Of course, journalism plays a key role within that ecosystem. High-quality journalism and the unprecedented transparency of social media keeps power structures in check, and sometimes these forces can drive genuine societal change. Reporters bring us news from the front lines of conflict and uncover hard truths through investigative journalism. That said, these positive impacts are sometimes overshadowed by harmful practices and negative externalities occurring in the media ecosystem. And I say the media ecosystem is in trouble. I grew up, Jeremy, I grew up, became an intern at the Sun Herald, worked my way up, and ultimately become a publisher of the newspaper. One of the things I remember, I had marketing responsibilities for a few years of my career. Then, obviously, as a publisher, marketing was always a key part of my responsibilities at the newspapers that I was fortunate to be publisher of. One of the things, even before social media, even before the internet, people had a tendency not to trust news sources. And usually it would be based on their bias. Now, some bias is external. It's people let you know what their bias is. Like, for example, in the old newspaper world, bias was often reflected on the editorial pages. And we worked really hard to keep bias out of the other parts of the paper. That's the external bias that would be on the editorial page. But then there's what would be more internal bias. It would be the bias that would be inside someone. And reporters will bring that bias to a story. And that's why in the old days when we had layers of editors, we could really make sure stories were corroborated. We could make sure that we tried to be as fair and honest as possible, that we kept the bias out of it, just the facts, so to speak. As Alberto Ibarguen has often said, the former publisher of the El Nuevo Herald and Miami Herald, and now the current president of the Knight Foundation, what he says often is that it's so important that we provide the news and information to people in a democratic society so that they can then see the facts for what they are, not with all this bias attached to it, but see the facts of what they are, and then decide for themselves, where they want to go. That's the key to a functioning democracy, isn't it, Jeremy?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I remember one of the first things that we were told in law school, our legal research and writing professor told us, you're going to, if you have a love for reading now, you're going to start reading everything after law school a lot more skeptically. And I think that that's been true for me. And I've kind of shared that with people, and I shared with someone the other day on you mentioned my post about outrage being created in our media, and I was asked, what sources do you look for? And really, I think print sources are still better than what you find on Facebook or what you get on the news, especially the national news. They're driving ratings up so that they can hit their advertisers. But if you read something, you read it skeptically, whether it be from the left or the right, and I encourage people to read both. You can draw facts out of that, but I do agree with you. I think it used to be a lot easier to do that with more investigative journalism and more of the the who, what, when, where, why, and how articles, rather than the gotcha pieces and the attack articles that we see today. I grew up over in Pascagoula reading the Mississippi Press, and the funny thing, like you mentioned, you had your editorial page, but we also had the old crab that would kind of say something catching, and that was always something you looked to. But it seems now like everything's the old crab. You've got old crabs from both the left and the right, just throwing their clickbait at you.
Yeah, there's no doubt. When we come back, again, I mentioned that even before the internet, news organizations had to be really careful to make sure that they worked really hard to try to keep bias out of reporting. Now, then Ted Turner started CNN and this cable news network, and they had to fill the time. Then Talking Heads came along, and then competing news networks, and the internet. The evolution has been unbelievable. And ironically, and we'll start in this next section, the fact that print has been hurt big time by the change in digital, the digital tsunami. That hasn't been a good development. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation about media with Jeremy England. See you after this.
When it comes to the outdoors, we are one. We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the great outdoors. So let's talk about it. Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews. Mondays starting at noon. Here on Super Talk Mississippi. Presented by the Foundation Protecting Our Outdoors Heritage. Listen or watch the show anywhere you get Super Talk Mississippi. If Alexa's part of your life, you've got one more way to access SuperTalk. SuperTalk Mississippi is now available on Amazon Alexa devices. Once enabled, just say, Alexa, play SuperTalk Mississippi at any time and start listening. It's that easy. Just one more way to stay informed and connected with your state. Learn more at supertalk.fm/Alexa. SuperTalk Mississippi. SuperTalk Mississippi. Now available on Amazon Alexa devices.
Hey, guess what? Bob is back, now at 106.3, playing the 80s, 90s, and whatever.
I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Check us out, the new Bob 106.3.
Get the news that matters to Mississippi on Middays with Gerard Gibbert. Middays with Gerard Gibbert. Each weekday starting at 10 a.m., Gerard brings you a spirited debate on the key stories of the day with the newsmakers and powerful reporting on the issues you care about. Listen on your local SuperTalk station or anywhere you get SuperTalk Mississippi. And watch the show live on C Spire Channel 70, SuperTalk TV, and on the SuperTalk Mississippi app. Gardening is one of the most popular hobbies in America, with the average gardener spending 5 hours a week in the garden. In Mississippi, keeping a healthy, beautiful garden is practically an obsession. But if you have questions about gardening, there's no better person to answer them than the garden mama, Nellie Neal. So whether it's gardening basics or troubles for the more experienced gardeners out there, the Garden Mama has the answers for you. Saturday morning starting at 8 on SuperTalk Mississippi and SuperTalk TV. Feeling down? Here's your prescription for a daily dose of good news and positive vibes. Good Things with Rebecca Turner. Every afternoon, Rebecca highlights all the good things happening right here in the state you call home. Daily exposure to Good Things with Rebecca Turner may cause smiling, feelings of positivity, happiness, and even laughter. When you experience these symptoms, tell your friends to listen.
Okay.
Weekdays starting at 2 p.m. here on SuperTalk Mississippi and now on Amazon Alexa devices.
Hey, guess what? Bob is back, now at 106.3, playing the 80s, 90s, and whatever.
I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Check us out, the new Bob 106.3.
His love for the coast is why he's here. It's Coast Vue with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We're having a conversation with Senator Jeremy England about I would say if I were going to frame this conversation, it's about the changing media landscape and how it has changed the discussion that happens in the public square today. Oftentimes, the public square is in social media because people will say something to you on social media they're not going to necessarily say to your face. And as I said to you before the show even started, when you add to that the complication that we never really know what someone's going through, that they may lash out at you on social media, but you're just a straw that broke the camel's back. And sometimes you would react, to the face value of their comment, not really understanding that they're having issues. But people will say things to you on social media they won't say to you in person. So, hey, Jeremy, one thing I want to mention just before we get into some of this breakdown of the 33 problems with media is that when I left the Sun Herald in 2009 to go be publisher of the Mobile Press Register, we had over 50 people in our newsroom. That was in 2009. And today, I think they have 4 or 5. Right. So what's happened? You said that the credible sources still there's a journalistic ethos that drives newspapers today that's just as important as it was back in the days, back in the early days. And that's why you still cite them as a credible source. But the reality is that the layers of editors and all the things that we had in place to make sure that we were trying to take bias out and making sure stories were relevant and well sourced, all that's gone now. And so what's happened, and then of course you've seen this incredible evolution of social media and fake news sources and all this other stuff, and it's gotten crazy. And I hate to say this, and this is coming from someone who's lived a life in it, I don't see a simple solution. I really don't. As I mentioned at the beginning, I see Facebook's going to make some changes that I think is going to help. But once we start to break all this down, man, it's complicated. It's super complicated. Any more observations about what we've talked about so far before we get into some of these items?
Yeah, no, just real quickly, I'll just say that I agree. I think media has become more consumer driven rather than information driven, like I believe it should be. And look, editorials play a very, very important role. The editor's page is just as important as the front page in a lot of ways. It grabs attention and it puts it out there. But we've gotten to where I think yellow journalism is creeping its way back in and becoming more of a norm. That we saw yellow journalism, the whole Remember the Maine issue that started the Spanish-American War, and that turned out to be completely false. The Spanish didn't attack our ship, the Maine, in Havana Harbor. But it sold newspapers. It got everybody outraged, and we went to war over it. So it's we've got a prime example there in history of why we have to step back and demand better from media.
I posted something the other day, and it referred to media, and a really dear friend of mine who is conservative, and he's a bit of an attack dog, unfortunately, these days on social media. But he came back to me and he says, there are no credible journalists. I mean, that was his statement. And then another friend who is a really noted journalist, I don't think my friend who made the initial comments realizes the guy who commented was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and he said there definitely are credible journalists in America today. But when you look at these 33 issues, 33 things that have caused people to have their doubts, I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle. Let's start looking at some of these. Right. Okay. The first one is tabloidization. And here's what it says about that. Enhanced focus on entertainment and the lives of celebrities and more superficial coverage of current events. Well, the truth is that we don't have the reporters out there like we used to have that could dig and not do a story for several weeks because they're really working on something with a lot of depth. What typically drives a lot of corporate decisions these days are where the most amount of audience is going to be. And see, they sell that audience. You have to have an enormous audience to be successful in the digital realm these days from a digital advertising point of view. So you've seen a lot of enhanced focus on entertainment and lives of celebrities. And boy, that is true. You see that on the internet every day, don't you, Jeremy?
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like it's been a lot more since 2016. It's shifted into where our those tabloids are involved in politics a lot more. And look, we elected, Donald Trump was a reality TV star. I mean, that's who we we ended up electing in 2016, and we're kind of seeing more. You're seeing the AOC headlines, out of New York. They grab your attention. But yeah, it's tabloid type journalism like that has us interested in things that we probably ought not really care as much about.
The next one is really powerful, and that's why I like this graphic so well. Again, 33 problems with media today, but the headline on it is filter bubbles. And here's what it says: highly personalized content feeds result in a lack of exposure to viewpoints that are outside a user's existing worldview. And I could go deeper into that, but I talk about this all the time. So what Facebook did is there's no way they could have enough humans. They wouldn't be profitable if they did, like newspapers and other media companies have to have. They cannot have enough humans. So what they've done is they use advanced artificial intelligence to determine what our news feeds are. So they're feeding us more information. See, what they used to do prior to doing this, they used to give us in our news feeds our friends in a basic sequential order as they posted. But that's how we would get it. But then they said, you know what? If we start doing it this way, using artificial intelligence to determine people's news feeds, we'll bring stuff into their news feeds that they would not otherwise have gotten from their friends, and we're going to spike some conversations. And usually the conversations we spike are they're going to spike more if it involves politics or something that where there's disagreement. So essentially what's happening is Facebook made more money by causing conflict with us, by causing division, by making it appear that everyone in your newsfeed agrees with you, and that was a major problem with media, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and then you just kind of an offshoot from that is that you have that like button, and so you're seeking that. So the more outrageous you are, you want those, you want followers to jump in and say, yeah, you really got them, you really hit them there. But it reminds me of something I was told recently. I've heard it before, and we hear it a lot now, and it's true. It's that you can never insult somebody into changing their mind. Right. And it seems like that's all we're trying to do now on social media. You want to get that one good hit in at the person. And really all you're doing, I use the boxing rink example a lot. You're sending the boxers to their corners and getting them ready to go back at it. I mean, there's no discussion. Well, no valuable discussion that comes from that.
Yeah, and the problem is that the amount of misinformation that gets shared in your newsfeed once a certain point of view is understood by the artificial intelligence, then it just continues to feed it, and after time, a very strong confirmation bias begins to occur. Tell people who don't know what confirmation bias is. Tell them what that is.
Yeah, so the confirmation bias is just that, you have this idea in your head, and say you get on Google or your Facebook algorithm already has you figured out, which is most likely to be the case. You start getting articles that just confirm what your opinion is on something. There's never any challenge to it. And as a conservative, I value competition in every part of our life, especially when it comes to our ideas and how we how we should move forward in this country and in this state. But you don't get that if you don't have that competition. You can really end up in a very tough spot where you might be wrong, or at least you might have a terrible idea that you've not challenged. All you've done is just reinforce that, and that's what confirmation bias. Why it can be dangerous. You can end up reinforcing some things that you probably shouldn't.
Well, a good example of that is in current events is Alex Jones. Alex Jones, you've seen him in the news, but he is the guy who said the Sandy Hook massacre did not take place, and he was sued, and the rest is sort of history. But we're learning a lot about Alex Jones through that process. But I mean, this guy was a purveyor of the conspiracy theory, and for a long period of time, Facebook eventually banned him, but for a very, very long period of time, the primary spreader of his conspiracy was Facebook. And so that's a good example. There are hundreds more, if not thousands more, just like him that are spreading misinformation that appear to be real, but they're not, and they're spreading misinformation and causing lots of problems in our society and in our democracy as a result. Right. And in that way, Facebook was complicit, really. I mean, because Facebook pushed people like Alex Jones forward because Alex was getting a lot of clicks. Alex was creating a lot of conversations and conflict and interactions between users. And the more interaction, the more money Facebook made. And they let that go on, and they continue to let it go on in a lot of ways for a long, long time before they took Alex Jones out of the mix. Less than a minute, but you can respond real quick.
Yeah, just real quick, I'll just say it reminds me, the more outrageous you are, the more attention you get. I had a friend in high school, and her dad was an assistant pastor at our church over in Pascagoula, and he would watch the Howard Stern show every night. And I asked her why. She said, well, he loves to get angry about it. He just hates what the guy says, so he tunes in every night. And I think that's kind of where a lot of us find ourselves. But we didn't have Facebook back then, so it's just a lot easier to find that outrageous content.
The next one is clickbait. It's sort of what we were talking about a few minutes ago, but clickbait's a little bit different because here's the subhead to what they said: a framing method that uses exaggerated language and omitted information to entice readers to click through or watch. Boy, the internet is full of clickbait. Some of it's news. A lot of it's just videos today. And frankly, that's what's changing. That's what's going to change Facebook. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue this conversation with Senator Jeremy England.
Listen live or on demand and watch episodes of Coast Vue on your laptop, desktop, or on your phone or tablet by going to supertalkmsgulfcoast.com.
When it comes to the outdoors, we are one. We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the great outdoors. So let's talk about it. Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews. Mondays starting at noon. Here on Super Talk, Mississippi. Presented by the Foundation Protecting Our Outdoors Heritage. Listen or watch the show anywhere you get Super Talk Mississippi.
Hey, guess what? Bob is back, now at 106.3, playing the 80s, 90s, and whatever.
I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Check us out, the new Bob 106.3.
Feeling down? Here's your prescription for a daily dose of good news and positive vibes. Good Things with Rebecca Turner. Every afternoon, Rebecca highlights all the good things happening right here in the state you call home. Daily exposure to Good Things with Rebecca Turner may cause smiling, feelings of positivity, happiness, and even laughter. When you experience these symptoms, tell your friends to listen.
Okay.
Weekdays starting at 2 p.m. here on Super Talk Mississippi and now on Amazon Alexa devices.
These are our friends. These are our neighbors. We all have the power to grow our local economy and energize our community. Shop small businesses and make a difference.
Get the news that matters to Mississippi on Middays with Gerard Gibbert. Middays with Gerard Gibbert. Each weekday starting at 10 a.m., Gerard brings you a spirited debate on the key stories of the day with the newsmakers and powerful reporting on the issues you care about. Listen on your local Super Talk station or anywhere you get Super Talk Mississippi. And watch the show live on C Spire Channel 70, Super Talk TV, and on the Super Talk Mississippi app.
For something new and unique in talk radio, take a listen to The Ben Shapiro Show. Every day, we're driving the debate in America with the fastest moving, hardest hitting, most comprehensive, fact-based commentary on the radio. We don't hold back. We never shy away from telling you the truth. Our show is a meeting place of ideas. We have the most important guests and the biggest thinkers in America.
Weeknights at 9.
For something new and unique in talk radio, take a listen to The Ben Shapiro Show.
On Super Talk Mississippi. You know that nowadays, most people go online to look at a business before they spend their money. Are customers able to find you online? With the power of SuperTalk Mississippi Media Digital, you can reach potential customers and get more referral and repeat business. SuperTalk Mississippi Media Digital's highly trained and trusted staff is ready to work with you to help your business capitalize on the power of digital marketing. Call 601-991-2305 or go to stmmdigital.com to get started today.
SuperTalk Mississippi. Just seems to me people have so much invested in not telling the truth. When you want the truth. Simply because it might hurt some feelings. And nothing but the truth. Lose some subscribers.
You want the Gallo Radio Show.
I just think in this audience, you still believe that if you tell the truth, you come out ahead.
The Gallo Radio Show.
And if you tell yourself otherwise, you're lying to yourself.
Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Hey, guess what? Bob is back, now at 106.3, playing the 80s, 90s, and whatever.
I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Check us out, the new Bob.
He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast Vue. We're having an insightful conversation about the problems with media today that have really, these problems have created a significant change in the way that we communicate with one another, the way that we debate or even willing to debate different points of view. We've lost a nicety in a lot of ways in the way we communicate with one another. One of the reasons is a problem that's called algorithm radicalization. And that kind of goes back to the filter bubbles in a way, but it's more specific. It says the hypothesis that recommendation engines can steer users toward increasingly extreme content or social platforms. And again, with someone, I like that phrase, incidentally, algorithmic radicalization, because essentially says that the more extreme you are, the more the artificial intelligence is going to feed you more radicalized views that go into your territory. And man, by the time you start to engage someone in a rational conversation about that subject, they've been reading this radical stuff from the algorithm and the artificial intelligence for a year. And buddy, they're convinced. You're the one who's lost your mind. They haven't lost their mind. They know the truth. You're just part of the establishment, and you don't know the truth anymore. And I really hate that, buddy. I hate that we're in that spot.
Yeah, I do too. And I know it's one of your favorite quotes. It's attributed to Mark Twain, but the quote is that it's easier to fool somebody than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. And the algorithms just push people further into these caves or these rabbit holes that they found themselves in. And to understand it, you almost have to be a rocket scientist. You have to understand how everything you like or even everything you click on and view, it sends you into this one data stream, and then they focus everything on that. So you're building yourselves, we're building ourselves a cave on social media, and we're seeing that, if we don't trust vaccines, we're going to get every bit of information that tells us why vaccines are terrible. Or if we don't trust the Republican Party, you're going to get everything negative. So folks on the left are going to start seeing everything negative about the Republican Party. It's just going to further convince people that they're right. And that there's not even any need for discussion. Just don't even worry about discussion because I'm right and you're wrong.
So the algorithm works off of data. So think about artificial intelligence essentially is computer learning. Kate takes in this and is able to make decisions about how this information is going to be sent to you. The sad thing is when they developed this artificial intelligence, it was literally an ad delivery mechanism. They were gathering all this data on you. I'm going to come back to the data here in just a second. They're gathering all this data on you, and it was a brilliant tool. But these 20-something-year-olds in California came up with that could take all this data that they're gathering and be able to target ads directly to you that would make ad targeting really efficient for advertisers. Okay, that was the original intention of this tool. But then someone had the idea, why don't we use it to also determine what goes into people's news feeds? And that brings me to the next problem, and it is surveillance capitalism. And the subhead to it says the capture and monetization of personal data. I've done a whole show on this. The amount of data, when you agree to go to Facebook or TikTok or any of these others, you're agreeing to let them have access to your data. Now, there's been a slight change in the way that Apple phones work, that you can literally say you can't have my data, and that actually is hit Facebook, cost Facebook billions of dollars. But the reality is they're gathering all this data about you. They know where you go. They know what you like and dislike. They know the websites you go to. You would not believe what you're agreeing to give them in terms of data. But surveillance capitalism is kind of a scary proposition when you think about TikTok being owned by China, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, very, very much so. And a funny story about that, when I was putting this office together, my wife and I were trying to get me a nice office to sit in and be able to read and do my work. She said, hey, would you like to have something like a beanbag chair? And I'd never even heard of a beanbag chair. Well, then I opened Facebook and there's an ad for a beanbag chair. And guess what? I've got a beanbag chair in my office.
Yeah.
And we were just talking. We weren't even on the app. We were just talking, and that popped up. So that was the one moment when I realized how in tuned all of this is to listening for key language and key terms, and then focusing it directly to you. Letting China have that information. Look, they're going to be able to. We have future leaders that we don't even know about yet. They're going to rise to the top of of each of the political parties. And China's collecting data on everybody, so they're going to be able, we talked about, worried about other countries being able to blackmail our leaders or be able to get underneath their skin somehow. And look, they're listening. They're going to know exactly what to do and know the best of all of us and the worst of all of us, unfortunately.
I think, unfortunately, this is something I worry about a lot, that Congress is so busy being polarized. They can't agree on some things, but when it comes to really, really, really complicated issues like what kind of data is TikTok developing? I know they went through an analysis about it, but the reality is TikTok continues to do business in America and is gathering billions of, if not trillions of pieces of data on Americans cumulatively, and it's incredible what they're learning about us, and it's not a good thing, man. It's not a good thing. Hey, another thing that's wrong is paywalls. But that's the only way some organizations, particularly print publications, can make money. They can't, their subscriptions have fallen dramatically, so they have to have paywalls. But what this mechanism usually does, though, is it prevents people from accessing information that's important for them to read. So we end up getting a lot of free content as a result of. I understand paywalls. Boy, do I understand why we have to have them. But what happens as a result of that is a lot of people don't get to read some really good news stories that they should read. Any comment about that?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick that I think those lead to expanded headlines, because you have your clickbait headline, and then you have that first paragraph that's usually free before you hit that paywall part of the article. And look, they're trying to draw your attention in and get you right there. So but if you don't click and pay for the rest of the article, you move on with whatever you drew from that first little headline grabber. Paywalls are difficult part of where we find ourselves. But I'm with you. I agree that you have to put, journalists do this. This is their job, and they deserve to be paid for it.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and there's still a struggle to find the revenue model that's going to sustain the efforts. And as a result, what's happened is you're seeing the next problem, which is news deserts, communities that are no longer served by dedicated local news media. And that's a sad reality, but it's true. I mean, people just can't afford to be in the business anymore. Hey, listen, it costs a lot of money to be in the newspaper business.
Right.
And a lot of newspapers are still trying to print newspapers. I've said this before, and I really believe it, that the printed newspaper died a long time ago. The industry unfortunately just hasn't been willing to give it a funeral yet. But part of the reason they haven't been willing to give it a funeral yet is because they're still trying to figure out how to make the business model work in the digital realm. A few companies have done that, but a lot have not, and as a result, companies have gone out of business, or certainly they've cut back on news resources, so much so that we have news deserts that are emerging all across the United States. Any comment about that?
Yeah, no, I hate that, because Mississippi is a rural state, so we find ourselves with a lot of news deserts. And I think, look, when I was going door-to-door campaigning for this job a couple of years ago, folks would tell me, look, be careful, watch out for AOC up there, And well, I'm not going to Washington. I'm going to Jackson, number one, but number two, AOC, she's up in New York, she's getting elected by her voters. I disagree with probably everything she says, but that's not our news market,
No.
but it is their news market, because they have to rely on national news now, because they don't have a good local consistent source for news here in Mississippi.
So they do. They just haven't found it yet, right? Yeah, you had a significant change in newspapers across the country. There are a couple of rich local owners, but for the most part, most of the major companies, for example, McClatchy, that owns the Sun Herald, have been consolidated and are run by venture capital firms. And so media consolidation has been a really, really big change. So corporate media is doing the best they can to sort of eke out as much profit out of the situations they possibly can. There's a lot more that's related to just how the stuff's done on the internet. Like for example, social bots, autonomous and human-run accounts on social media platforms that manipulate discussions and boost specific messages. A lot of ad clutter. Astroturfing, publishing content that creates the illusion grassroots interest in a policy or individual. Deplatforming, when individuals and communities are banned from social and publishing platforms. Context stripping, no-fly zones, infotainment, horse race journalism, fake news and disinformation, good versus evil, rumor cascades. I haven't even scratched the surface, buddy. When you start to add it up, it is complicated, and I don't see where all this goes. We're going to talk about hit and run coverage and dogpiling and implied truth effect and all these things when we come back. We'll continue this conversation with Senator Jeremy England. See you after this.
Also listen live to SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on your Amazon Alexa devices. Once you've enabled the skill, just say, Alexa, open SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast.
You know that nowadays, most people go online to look at a business before they spend their money. Are customers able to find you online? With the power of SuperTalk Mississippi Media Digital, you can reach potential customers and get more referral and repeat business. SuperTalk Mississippi Media Digital's highly trained and trusted staff is ready to work with you to help your business capitalize on the power of digital marketing. Call 601-991-2305 or go to stmmdigital.com to get started today. Get the news that matters to Mississippi on Middays with Gerard Gibbert. Middays with Gerard Gibbert. Each weekday starting at 10 a.m., Gerard brings you a spirited debate on the key stories of the day with the newsmakers and powerful reporting on the issues you care about. Listen on your local SuperTalk station or anywhere you get SuperTalk Mississippi. And watch the show live on C Spire Channel 70, SuperTalk TV, and on the SuperTalk Mississippi app. Whether you're brand new to the DIY craze or a seasoned veteran, the Handyman Show has something for you. Buddy Slowick shares tips and tricks on everything from odd jobs to complete build-outs, from small home repairs to serious construction. So no matter if you're at the master carpenter level or not quite sure how to use a level, the Handyman Show answers your questions with a healthy dose of humor and some great music too. Saturdays, 10 to noon on SuperTalk Mississippi and on SuperTalk TV.
SuperTalk Mississippi. Just seems to me people have so much invested in not telling the truth. When you want the truth. Simply because it might hurt some feelings. And nothing but the truth. Lose some subscribers.
You want the Gallo Radio Show.
I just think in this audience, you still believe that if you tell the truth, you come out ahead.
The Gallo Radio Show.
And if you tell yourself otherwise, you're lying to yourself.
Mornings on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Hey, I'm Steve Azar, and you never know who or what you'll hear when I spend a Mississippi Minute with my friends. We're talking to Del Berra. Take me back to growing up and what it was like in the household with a dad like Yogi Berra.
You know, we grew up with his funny sayings. You know, I remember Dad managing the Mets, and me, Larry, and Timmy are watching the game on TV. And all of a sudden, two streakers run out of the stands on TV, and the camera flips away from them. So when he gets home, me, Larry, and Timmy say, "Hey, Dad, those streakers, what were they, boys or girls? We need to know." And Dad looked us right in the eye and said, "I couldn't tell. They had bags over their heads."
In a Mississippi Minute.
Be sure to check out In a Mississippi Minute with me, Steve Azar, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi, the SuperTalk Mississippi app, and now available on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher.
When it comes to the outdoors, we are one. We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the great outdoors. So let's talk about it. Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews. Mondays starting at noon. Here on Super Talk Mississippi. Presented by the Foundation Protecting Our Outdoors Heritage. Listen or watch the show anywhere you get Super Talk Mississippi.
Final segment of Coast Vue, we're having a conversation with Senator Jeremy England about the problems that exist in media today and how it has impacted the public conversation. And I just started reading off some of these problems when we went to break, but there's too many to count. There's 33 in this particular chart, and there's a lot to it. There's two that I want to talk about in particular here. One is fake news disinformation, and here's the subhead on that: deliberately disseminating untrue information and publishing fake news. Outlets will sometimes adopt the look and feel of credible news outlets without applying the same standards of quality. So that's one. The next one is implied truth effect, attaching warnings to specific pieces of content, increasing perceived accuracy of content without warnings. Research has found that warnings tag help people identify false content, but also make them more likely to believe false stories that are untagged. Wow. How do people know what to trust, Jeremy?
Yeah, look, you have to get as many sources as you can and really trust your gut. And look, I turn a lot to my faith on things like that, because if I have a good solid foundation based on family and faith and my conservative principles, I can wade into some pretty tough things, knowing that I'm strong enough to do that. So I think that's number one. I think folks need to know who they are, and then number two, know that look, that might be the only person you need to trust when it comes to what you feel. I really did not like when President Barack Obama would make a statement. He would say, that's not who we are, or that's not what America is. And I thought, that's a prime example of just putting a period at the end of the sentence and moving on and not having discussion about it. And I never liked that. And I think that's kind of where we find ourselves sometimes. So we have to have that openness to the media and to the social media aspect of things. It's definitely not good to ban certain ideas. because again, I can't come back to it enough that the competition of ideas, the discussion that has to be had about things, whether you like it or not, and look, it's tough to change your opinion on things. I know this specifically. It's very tough to be challenged and realize, you know what, maybe I've looked at this from the wrong way. But I think it was Winston Churchill who said that, look, if you can't change your mind, you'll never change anything.
Yeah.
But how do you go about getting the right facts, right? It's a challenge that we all have.
It's hard, and cable news especially. But a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of these things that we're talking about are both on cable news and are spread in on the internet. Like for example, explicit bias. When the attitudes and beliefs of publishers overtly dictate what stories are covered and how those stories are framed. Now, Fox would have one point of view about that, and CNN would have another point of view about that. But I had an experience. The NBC News, after Hurricane Katrina, sent a noted reporter. In fact, I framed his thank you note to me afterwards as a reminder that sometimes reporters don't get good leadership. But they were sent down here to do a story about how African American and Vietnamese homes were being bulldozed on the point of Biloxi after Hurricane Katrina. And I said, seriously? There are no homes left on the point. They were wiped out by Hurricane Katrina. Right. And I said, let me take you. I took him there and showed him, the whole. And so the next day he did a story, he interviewed me, and he says, I'm sorry, but the headline's still going to be that you're bulldozing African American and Vietnamese homes. I said, are you kidding me? He said, that's the story. That's the way the story was framed by producers in New York. I said, man, that's what's wrong with news media today. And he kind of bowed his head and kind of understood the situation. But that's terrible, man. That's terrible when they want to frame. Mississippi gets in that. We get in that position too often, where they cherry pick or they have one of the next ones, narrative fallacy. They don't want to get both sides. There's a lot of sensationalism. It's not good, unfortunately.
Right. And look, that's flat out yellow journalism there, too. You've got the story in your mind and you just go find your facts to put in it to make your story read the way you want it to read, which is another thing. We always hear now from the media, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Well, that sounds great. But when you've got the story in mind and you're going and like you say, cherry picking the facts to put in there, you're the one doing that. And that leads to distrust, especially amongst those of us here in Mississippi that knows that was not, we know that was not true. We know that we as Mississippians, particularly here on the Gulf Coast, we all suffered together and we all pulled together. And that's your story, is how resilient the Gulf Coast was and how, even when it comes to race relations, we're living race relations here in Mississippi. We have to. We're one of the most diverse states in the country. But I guess what sells outside of Mississippi is something that's just a complete lie that I guess folks buy into, and it sells newspapers. But it's a terrible situation.
Well, we're coming to our end of our time together, but the last one, all this leads to what is called argument culture, defaulting to an adversarial approach when encountering people with an opposing worldview. I wish that people would realize that a lot of what you and I just talked about is about manipulation. Is about leading them to a place that is often false. Certainly is full of misinformation and bias. And what it's doing is creating the opportunity for them to seek confirmation bias. And then of course, this argument that you talked about at the very beginning, there is actually addictive. The same chemicals that drive this outrage, and we want to be outraged, is the same thing that drives addiction in lots of other ways. But hey, we're going to continue this conversation on Coast Vue. Our goal is to educate people and make them a little bit more open-minded. And hopefully this conversation did that. Thank you for taking the time, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. I appreciate it. And happy belated birthday to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it, my friend. This has been Senator Jeremy England, a good friend of Coast Vue. Have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook. Facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.